Hey, welcome back to the Legal Lead Sharks podcast. Today, we are going to be interviewing Jimmy Lai. He's a first in our series, Lawyer Up, the Next Generation. So this series is going to be all about people building and growing their law firms and what it takes to be able to scale to the top, which I know is your goal, Jimmy. So welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the show. I'm honored to be the first guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've heard your story. I'm so excited to have you on today for you to share your journey with people and share your vision of where you're going. And we'll just deep dive into that so everyone else can get caught up to speed.
Sounds good.
Okay, tell us a little bit. I know you're originally from Taiwan and you're about to make a trip back there for like a month, which sounds amazing. I wish I were joining you. I need a long vacation. And then you're here in Oklahoma City like me. We're in the same year in my backyard here. You went to University of Oklahoma, got your law degree. And so just kind of tell us a little bit about the whole journey. Like what made you want to be a lawyer? What brought you to Oklahoma?
Sure, of course. Yeah, right after this, I'm heading on a plane at 5 p.m. right after our recording. I'll share briefly about my journey. I was born in Taiwan. I actually moved to South Dakota when I was 10 years old with my mom as she pursued her degree there. We lived in South Dakota for about 5 years. And when she finished her studies, I was on a F2 dependent visa. So I had no legal options to be able to stay in the U.S. So at that point, having lived in the U.S. for 5 years, my Chinese wasn't good enough anymore. I couldn't really go back to Taiwan for their education because K through 12 compared to the US is on a whole different level there. To give you an example, when I went to South Dakota when I was 10 years old, my math in Taiwan was towards the bottom of the class. But when I got to South Dakota, suddenly I was like a genius among my classmates. So that's like the difference. So what happened was, yes, I couldn't go back to Taiwan. So what happened was we found out about the high school exchange opportunities. For my sophomore year, I was in Japan. Junior year, I was in Germany. Senior year, I was in England. And so my sister, she did the same thing. She's 2 years younger than me, but she did her exchange in Quebec, Canada, France. And then her last place was Norman, Oklahoma. So that's how we got to Norman, Oklahoma. Was her host family in Norman really loved my sister. And they told her, you and your brother go to OU and you can live with us for free. We'll take care of you. We looked at the international student OU tuition compared to UCO, University of Central Oklahoma. It was 2 for the price of 1. So it was an easy decision for us to go to UCO in Edmond instead. My sister and I, we enrolled in UCO at the same time. And the quick reason of why I had a 2-year gap between high school and university was because for Taiwanese citizens, we had mandatory military service. So I had to go back to Taiwan and get that sorted. You couldn't leave the country until you serve in the military, or if you had a university enrollment papers to be able to leave the country. I actually wanted to be in the military to get some exercise and get fit. But at first I thought, my feet was flat. So maybe I'll be exempt because of that. But what happened was they said my feet wasn't flat enough, but you're fat enough. You're too fat to be in the military. So not flat, but fat. You're too fat. So that So in that way, I didn't have to serve in the military anymore because I was too fat. So that's just a quick short story. So yeah, in Oklahoma, 2012 was when I came here. It's 13 years ago when I went to UCO, did my marketing degree. And then with the marketing degree as an international student, the job prospects were also minimal. It's not a highly technical degree. A lot of Americans are studying marketing. And those jobs tend not to be sponsored. So I ended up being a car salesman for a little over 10 months. And when I first decided to be a car salesman, my mom asked me, like, why did you go sell cars? Like, you don't need a degree to go sell cars. And, I answered that I'm an introvert. So I'm, kind of more of a shy person. I'm so shy where I know you and I see you at the grocery store and you're in aisle 1. And if I need something from aisle 1, I'll deliberately go to aisle 2 and avoid you until you leave aisle 1 and I'll go get my stuff and leave. So that I don't have to say, oh, hi, how are you? That's not me. So that's how shy I was. So I decided I need to challenge myself because in every aspect of life, you're always selling, regardless of whether you're selling a car. Right now, I'm selling legal services and selling solutions to people's problems. So throughout life, it's all sales. So I figured I'll go do car sales. But first day on the job, I realized that there's no work sponsorships available. So maybe it was time for me to go to law school. I'm so sorry for jumping a lot back and forth. Brings me back to the reason why I decided to pursue law, which was growing up, my mom started a language school kindergarten. The parents were lawyers, doctors, doctors, business owners, politicians. And my mom was more of a no-nonsense type of educator. So if you don't break with her education policies, she would go ahead and refund you the tuition. So that was my first early lesson, was not all money is good money. So she was willing to
Wow.
refund the tuition.
It's a
But by
powerful
doing
lesson.
so, yes, but by doing so, she offended those lawyers, doctors, business owners, politicians. They felt like, oh, is my kid not good enough for your school? So they'll be angry and they'll go to my mom and say, oh, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to go to the media. I'm going to go find other politicians to get involved to get my kid back to school with your school. And as a 5-year-old growing up, I saw that often. And so one day I told my mom, I want to be a lawyer to protect her. So that was my first initial reason of why I decided to be a lawyer.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. Yeah, the bullying. And I love that you got out of your comfort zone and pushed yourself out there. With me, I have 3 boys. 2 of the 3 I've homeschooled, and I decided not all of the education system was in line with what I thought was right. With my boys, I let them go down the rabbit trails of what interests them, because I knew they would go really deep and study. My middle boy, he's going to be 17 this month. He went into an internship program for entrepreneurs where he was getting interviewed by business owners on his business
Wow, that's
plan.
amazing.
Yeah. And so his business plan was legal lead sharks. I posted on this on LinkedIn, a proud
Yeah, I
mom.
saw that. Wow.
And so the funny thing is, the other kids in the class had, duck shirts or phone cases, and he had a real business. So he had real stats, real models, real life practice. On the panels, one of the interviewers was an attorney. He's like, "What? Pick this." I got grilled on like a full marketing plan for attorneys when they're getting questions about like their duck shirt, He's like, "Oh." And he's out there sweating, and he goes, "Thankfully, I knew most of the answers, but wow." He's like, I wasn't prepared for an attorney to be like, "Oh, great, we need this. So what about this? And what about that? And what about this?" He was like, "Oh my God, what?"
I was going to say, he's got a great head start, and maybe he could be one of your account managers.
Yep. He's interning with me right now and interning with a roofing company here in Oklahoma City that I know the owner of. So just keep pushing him out. And he's like you, an introvert. He loves to be at home, doesn't care about being out and about. He said the best thing he got out of it was it pushed him way, way outside of his comfort zone. And he said, it wasn't that bad. Everything I was dreading when I did it, I was like, well, that wasn't that bad. So I love that you had that heart to protect your mom, because there are a lot of bullies out there. And as a business owner myself, we've run into that where it's the same thing. I was like, this isn't a good fit because of disagreements, but the way the disagreements were being handled on one side, I was like, that's not the way I do business. If we're going to have a conversation, it needs to be civil. And if not, best of luck, go where you're better suited. And I've had attorneys try to sue me for that too. It's a real thing. I love that you came into it as there's injustice in the world, and I'm going to help fight it.
Yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. That's one of the reasons why I started a law firm, was to help people. As a business owner, I can't do that. I have to kind of put myself, turn the light switch on, just like when I was selling cars. I didn't want to go approach people. I hated it, but I kind of, okay, I'm at work, turn the switch on and go approach people. And so I would have to walk out to the lot, and people will be running away from car salesmen. And I'll just bring, in the middle of the summer, I'll just bring 2 cold waters. I was like, hey, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but here's just some waters, and come find me inside when you're ready. That's kind of what I did. As an introvert, I struggle quite a lot having to put myself out there. And LinkedIn for me was kind of like an outlet where I don't have to go live, and I can write it in a written form and express my journey and my opinions.
Yeah, I get that. I'm opposite. I'm very extroverted. I've always loved being out and about, but all 3 of my sons would all prefer to get to be introverts whenever the opportunity allows. So that leads us to an interesting next question. So you went to law school. They don't teach you anything about business. And that's where I think a lot of lawyers struggle to get out of what I like to call the messy middle. We've got solo practitioners who have it's a one-man show, right? It's a lawyer, maybe an admin or front desk person, and that's all they want to be. And that's totally cool. But you came into this as a business owner, and we'll get into your story a little bit of how, why did you go into it as, let me open my firm versus just a solo practitioner? We'll get into that in a minute. But I find that messy middle, people that are trying to come up and scale a little bit, they're struggling most because they don't think about their law practice as a business. They're thinking of it like, I'm a lawyer, this is a law office, but it's a business. And in order to run it like a business, you have to realize you're a salesperson, you're a marketer, you're the head of HR, and you've got to wear all these other hats. And I think that's where a lot of lawyers struggle, and maybe even are failing, is they are comfortable being a lawyer, and that's what they were trained and taught to be. But being a lawyer who is scaling a law firm, those are 2 different things. And that leads me to my next question, which would be, okay, so now you graduated law school and you had another big struggle, another big bump of the road. You're highly educated. Now you have two degrees. Technically, you have a law degree and a marketing degree. And then what was your next step? I know you hit a big struggle after college, and that leads us to another interesting part of your story.
Yeah, when you spoke about interest earlier, that's one thing I actually would caution against if you're going to law school. Do not take classes that interest you because, or if your goal is to find a job right out of school, you need the good grades. You need the top scores you can get. You need to get the A's. I didn't listen to any of the advice about getting a better grade. I pursued classes that interest me. And what happened was I ended up getting B's and C's. So I was more of a bottom 40 percentile student when I was approaching graduation. And then 2020 happened. Me being international, my grades were the bottom 40 percentile. I figured it's going to be really hard for me to find a job with those combinations involved. So I decided to add on another degree. So I added MBA degree to the law degree, and I didn't graduate until December of 2021. So at that point, that's where I started to apply to a lot of different job openings. And every time there's a question on the form asking, will you now or in the future require a work visa? And me being an honest person, I always click yes. And then 5 minutes later, automatically I receive an email saying, sorry, you're not qualified, even for jobs that I'm overqualified for. So I've even applied to jobs where they don't even require a law degree, just a bachelor degree with no experience. Even under those circumstances, after I applied, but as soon as I clicked that yes button and submit, I received the feedback saying I'm not qualified. So that was the roadblock I had. Being international, couldn't find a job, and also my grades weren't ideal. Couldn't get interviews. The doors weren't even opening for me. I couldn't even step into the door just for an interview. So I had to really create my own law firm. Luckily, I found out about this visa, which is what I'm on right now. It's called the E2 Equity Investor Visa, which allows me to invest a small amount into starting my own business. And what happened was I didn't find out about this visa until closer to graduation. So I didn't really have much time to plan and prepare. Luckily, I just texted a law school classmate of mine, and he's now my firm partner, Braden Turner, just through text. I just texted him, hey, do you want to start a law firm together? And he was like, okay, sure. So that's a, anticlimactic, not so interesting story about how we started the firm. He was in Louisiana. I was in Oklahoma. He wanted to come back to Oklahoma, and I just texted him, hey, do you want to start a firm together? Luckily, he trusted me and he said, sure. Then going into the beginning days, I figured as a fresh out of law school graduate, I cannot outcompete the lawyers with 10, 20, 30-year experience. So I looked at various angles of how we can differentiate ourselves, because I can't go on and say, hey, I got 10 years experience. I got 20 years experience. Here are the list of clients I have. I don't have any of those. So early on, I knew that I cannot view myself as a big shot lawyer or attorney. And previously, I thought that people would just seek out attorneys. You know how to do marketing. If you're well known, you're popular. If you did a big case, that clients would just flock to you. And that was the misconception early on. However, when I started the law firm, I knew I had to treat it like a business. Even though I knew I needed to treat it like a business, I was still struggling. The first 9 months was a struggle. I started the firm October 2022. Every month, either we were breaking even or we were losing money for the first 9 months. And it wasn't until we brought on the first hire, I realized that I needed help. I wanted to do everything myself. So the first 9 months, I was wearing all the hats. I was answering the phone calls. I was Jimmy, the secretary, Jimmy, the paralegal, and Jimmy, the law firm owner, or Jimmy, the lawyer, or Jimmy, the partner. Well, 9 months in, I knew I needed help. I couldn't do it alone. And just by serendipity, I found our business manager in the All Things Admin group. I don't know if you're familiar with that Facebook group, All Things Admin.
Yep.
He posted about he was retired from California. He came to Oklahoma and he started a new position doing door-to-door sales for ADT. And he kind of explained about his experience. And then in the post, something came to me. It was a Saturday morning. Somehow his post went viral within that group. So I commented underneath it saying, given your prior marketing and business experience, would you be interested in helping a young law firm grow? And then, the rest was history. He DM'd me right away. And next day he came to the interview, and then he started 2 days later. So which was contrary to what we're doing now. At that time, I was hiring fast and firing slow. Now we are hiring slow, and we're still learning to fire fast it feels bad to have to terminate people from the organization, but it has to be done. And I'm learning that. Right? In fact, my first termination was another law school friend of mine, and that was a really tough conversation for me.
Yeah. Well, the thing I love about hearing what you've gone through, I know it sucks. And I have that story from my own journey of watching something that was just like fell flat on my face, but man, did I learn a lot from it. And I think that gives us so much grit. It gives us so much tenacity when a business owner has to struggle, and we have to figure out like how to make it work, even when we have to figure out things we don't know. Because things aren't working. I think that's why a lot of people, honestly, in my opinion, don't make it in business. I think it's like 5% make it, and then 1% make it over $1 million a year in business, as far as stats go. Last time I looked, but I can see why. I mean, you have the scars, if you will, from falling down and having to get up and figure things out and do everything, do all the jobs. You're the secretary, janitor, you're the sales guy, and everything. So I get that. And I love the grit, the success stories that come out of people that had to figure stuff out. And you went all the way from the beginning. Like, you had to figure out how to make a business work before you were ready, because that was your only option. You get somebody cornered into one option and they'll either make it work or they'll give up, and you push through. You have some grit from this story. And now we fast forward a little bit and you guys are a growing firm. You've got some staff there with you. So tell us a little bit about your practice. And I know you've used your own struggle and having to figure out how to make it and how to stay here and problem solve for yourself. You've used that to help a lot of people now too in your practice. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how that part of your story is now translating to helping so many other people.
Sure. Yeah. So my primary practice area right now is business immigration. I do some family-based adjustments or family-based immigrations as well. For me, I think when clients come to me, they can feel the shared experience that we both have,
The empathy.
and the empathy
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
have for them. I understand the struggles because I've been through it myself. So when I share that, they know that I understand what they're going through. So I will do everything in my power to help them as best as I could to achieve their dream. And one other thing I'm doing is helping others with their E2 visas as well. So I've been running a campaign to help others start their own business. And I like to call the E2 visa the American Dream Visa, because it's somehow a little bit more attainable, because the other investor option is a 900,000 EB5 option. And most people don't have that kind of money. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit harder for people. So the E2 visa typically requires around 100,000, but we had some cases where 40,000, 50,000 were approved. So it just really depends on the business and how substantial the investment is, the growth opportunities, and how the business itself can benefit the U.S. economy. That's ultimately what a treaty investor visa is about. So that's what I'm doing right now to help our clients. The other aspects, we do the EB1s, the EB2, NIW. Those are self-petition options. So people who are extraordinary, they have extraordinary abilities, they can self-petition their own green cards without an employer to sponsor them. And the same, even though I don't have those EB1s or EB2 NIW myself, I relate to them. These similar struggles, they have to kind of forge their own path. They have to show that they're extraordinary, and they also have to show that what they propose to do will benefit the U.S. So those are some, why I think goes back to the empathy and why it's one of our core values of our firm.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh, now immigration's a big topic. I know you're helping people with that right now. Man, immigration is a big topic. So tell me from your perspective how you've been able to help people through navigating this. Are you seeing a big impact here in Oklahoma, since that's your area of expertise?
Sure. Immigration's separated in a lot of different categories. And these months, we definitely had an uptick of phone calls asking about ICE holds. If, people, if they had DUI or speed, or they were arrested for alleged crimes, they'll have an ICE hold. And people will be calling us like, okay, how do we navigate around the ICE hold? And really, there's nothing much that can be done except for trying to place a bond and see whether ICE would come pick them up, and then they will go to ICE custody. And at ICE, you can request a bond hearing to see if you can get released from immigration. So those are some of the things that's happening now. We've seen the uptick of those inquiries. I personally, myself, we don't practice too much of those, but we do get those inquiries, and we try to be helpful. Even though we don't practice it, we give them a quick, I wouldn't say advice, because the intake team, they can't give legal advice, but we'll give them a quick rundown of what the process looks like, and then we'll refer them to other immigration firms lawyers in Oklahoma that specifically they do the removal defense.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was wondering if that affected us much. Texas and Mexico are right up to each other. So it's probably more of that kind of immigration law that's probably skyrocketing right now with people that are needing help. That's interesting. So Jimmy, okay, we've kind of heard your journey. You started this and you had passion for this because even as a child, you saw injustice, right? And that's really what drove you down this path. And then you got into law. And funny enough, I guess, ironically, we could say you figured out how to help yourself. And then you figured out that that would help a lot of other people too. That's what's been your passion behind your firm and giving you guys some success is that empathy that you know what it feels like, right? Tell me about what's your vision for the firm? Where do you see you guys in the next 5 years? What are you working towards?
Sure. And when you talked about irony, I want to go back real quick. The irony of my situation, which is another irony, is that I am here on a non-immigrant visa. The E2 visa is not a green card. It's not a citizen. The irony is I'm helping other people get their green cards and citizenship. So I often tell my clients the joke that in order to achieve my American dream, I have to help you achieve your American dream first. And that's the irony of my situation right now is that I'm not a green card holder. I'm not a citizen. And yet I'm in a position that I can help other potential immigrants make sure they're doing things legally, get legal immigration. And if there are relief afforded for them, that they can use those relief options. And so that's kind of the irony I want to touch on real quick. And going back to your question of what the vision is, right now our firm has grown from initially myself and my partner being part-time and then the business owner. So the entire 2023, it was just the three of us when we ended 2023. In 2024, we went from 3 of us to 15 of us at the end of 2024. We service family law, criminal defense, estate planning. One thing that we're trying to get into is personal injury. And that's the thing about me. Another thing about me is I'm stubborn. I'm hard-headed sometimes. I don't listen to advice. But when you talked about niching down earlier of how you niche down to legal marketing, I was told to niche down to pick an area. I niche down to what you want to do, but I was too afraid of putting all eggs in one basket. So in that sense, I haven't listened to advice about niching down yet. For my own practice, this year I've been more focused on, okay, I only do immigration cases for myself, but we have other attorneys in the law firm that does other laws. So we're more a general practice law firm, but we have leaders of each divisions kind of doing a different practice area. So that's kind of how we grown our business. And the vision is we would like to get into personal injury, help people who are injured and who needs attorneys to help tell their stories of the people's negligence and how it affected their life, so we can get them compensated well for the things that happened to them that weren't their fault. And I'm going to be bold and say in 20 years, I would like to be like Parrish and Devon in Oklahoma.
That's awesome. Yeah. And they all start somewhere. Harrison Devon Pepper, I love his story. He's from a small town in Oklahoma and scaled to one of the local celebrities in Oklahoma as far as personal injury goes. And you have to start somewhere. And I see the grit in you. And that stubbornness is a good trait too, because it means you won't give up on something. It may be a bumpy road, but you'll figure out how to get there. I work with all law firms, all legal verticals. Personal injury is kind of my bread and butter for marketing because I know it's tough. It's competitive. It's expensive. And just like you said, I think the idea coming out of law school for someone, it could be easy to think, well, I win a big case and everybody will come to me. Or if I do one TV commercial, but man, it's a full-blown marketing game to compete in that niche. And I know we both read Mike Morris's Fireproof book, and I love his story too. I mean, the grit that he had to go through to build one of the biggest PI firms in Detroit, it was tough for him. It really was. And he was taking a lot of the cases other lawyers didn't want. And he was working on like $1 million cases. And in doing so, he gained that reputation of he wins, Mike wins.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of business sense. So what you're learning right now in your journey, I think is going to catapult you in that sector because you'll better understand the business of running a law firm. When you get into that competitive market, you'll be ready to play the game and not making some of those mistakes that you might have made that are a lot more expensive at that level because the playing field it's a big one.
I'm curious, what's the cost per click that you're seeing across industry for Google ads? And that's one thing that we're interested in growing our PI division, but we definitely do not have that kind of budget yet. And so I'm curious to hear from you, like what the cost per click looks like and what would be your advice on someone starting, kind of looking into getting into the PI, like what kind of budget they need to set aside to really be able to sign up clients and make it a viable option motivation to keep it going?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll give you kind of a high level answer and then offline I can tell you more. And I actually need to do a lot more videos on this because it is a pretty complex process. But with Google Ads for personal injury, and then also realizing that Google's the only direct source for leads, right? You can do Facebook ad, TikTok ad, commercial ads, billboards. Those are all what we call pattern interrupt or branding. So no one that just gotten an injury is going to be like, oh, there's the billboard for Car and Car, Parrish and the Bond, or Mike Morris, like right in front of you. Google Ads, personal injury is probably it's one of the top 5 most expensive verticals in Google Ads. Coming into Google Ads, I always warn people, or at least set the expectations, because my goal is for you to win, right? My goal is for you to get into the game that you can play and win. But just to start out, like for our firm personally, if you're personal injury, let's say Oklahoma, because that's where you're at. In other markets like DFW, Miami, Detroit, things like that, I would say the barrier to entry is a lot higher. But in Oklahoma City, I would say a healthy Google Ads budget per month would be $20K. And then you have to pay marketing fees. And then, of course, you need the intake to be able to take those and qualify those leads. I'm about to do an interview with Chris Rose. Are you familiar with Chris Rose?
No,
He's
I'm
with
not.
Legal Flair. Okay, I need to make a
Okay.
connection with you guys. Legal Flair. He does something really cool. He's actually a practicing lawyer, but he branched off into starting Legal Flair. He's based out of Las Vegas. And essentially what he does, so quick shout out, Chris, to you, is when you're running ads, you're going to get all kinds of stuff. So for example, one of my PI firms in Dallas, they get immigration law, they get ticket law, they get family law, they get just all kinds of stuff, right? Lemon law, medical malpractice, which is a whole different division of personal injury. And it's kind of like a subcategory that's really hard in a lot of states to win because of the laws in those states. So what Chris does is so you're not wasting your ad spend budget. He takes those leads that aren't your vertical, which in your case, it would be great because you're like, oh, we can do family law. Oh, we can do immigration. We can, so you can filter those and still win with those. But in most of their cases, if they're just doing PI, they need to refer those leads out to somebody else. What Chris's company does is basically that. He'll take all of the irrelevant leads that are still good leads, but not for your practice, and send them on for a fee to whatever practice that is. But anyways, getting back to Google Ads, like $20K a month, and you need to have at least 4 months of a budget. And I know this sounds horrible, but Google Ads is a bidding game. And so they don't let the big guys monopolize everything. So it doesn't matter if the big guy in the city is spending $100K a month, you still get to compete. However, at anywhere from $100 to $500 per click or conversion, that goes really fast. So I tell my clients, have 4 months of your budget saved. And then in the back of your mind, think to yourself, if I don't get in a return in this 4 months, I'm willing to take that investment into my business. Now, odds are, because I like to underpromise and overdeliver, odds are you are going to get cases and you are going to close those, and it is going to pay out your settlements. But with personal injury specifically, there's a really long cash cycle. So from the time you're spending the money to the time your settlement's paid out, it could be a year on some of those. And so I help personal injury laws plan for that and see the long game in that, because you might have 63 pending clients that you're working with, and then you're going to get paid out anytime between now and 2 years from now on those settlements. And it's being able to be prepared financially to float yourself 90 days to 6 months so that you can see that money come back in, and then your ads are paying for themselves. That's kind of the Google Ads perspective on it, or the barrier to entry for Oklahoma City and personal injury. The other thing I really help law firms with, and this is a bottleneck I saw when I started working with them, is the intake. When you're getting those leads, it's not like a plumber. If you have a plumbing emergency, they're going to call the first one. If you can come out, you get the job, you get paid at the end of that week or that month. There's so many pre-qualifiers. Were you in the right state? Were you injured? Was it not your fault? And all of these things. And the intake I have seen be one of the biggest bottlenecks for law firms. So we actually just launched a product called Intake EQ, which is a virtual call center. And the AI sounds just like a real person. They never have a bad day. They never get emotionally tired of having to filter these calls and all of this stuff, you know? They never call in sick, but that's where that idea was born out of, because I can be doing an amazing job on your ads. But if after the click they call and we miss them, that was a $500 call that just slipped away because someone didn't answer the phone, or they didn't answer the phone properly or whatever. What I've done is I've kind of stepped into, and like I said, I read the book Fireproof, which people are like, why would you read that book? You're not a law firm. You're not a lawyer. But I stepped into the mind of a business owner as far as running a legal practice and thought to myself, where are are all the gaps? Where are they spending money that it's just burning it and they have nothing to show for it? And that's what I started to really dive down and problem solve for law firms, because there's a lot that goes into the click all the way to the signed case and then the settlement being paid out. And if there's any holes in the boat anywhere along the way, then it's really easy at that level of an ad spend. It's really easy to get yourself in a pickle and not be able to be profitable.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Thanks for the answer. It's really informative and definitely shows that you're really good at what you do. And I'm definitely gonna have to talk to you offline about the intake EQ option. I'll be interested to learn more about it, because right now we have 2 intake, but sometimes we do miss phone calls and we do miss the follow up. So I think that's a really great solution.
Yeah, and it's bilingual and up to 6 languages, which English and Spanish are the 2 big ones around here, and more languages are being added. And I'm really proud of how detailed it is and how real it even has background sounds like a call center background noise. But it's really streamlining everything, because once that call is qualified and sent to your firm, it's a live transfer with the notes. So you know like exactly what happened on the call. And it's not just for personal injury. It's for any business really that is missing calls. I like to say like a missed call is missed business, because they just hang up and call your competitor. So being able to have a live agent 24/7 to filter those calls and book appointments for you, it helps to catch the people before they move on. So yeah, I'd love to share more about it.
Yeah, great.
Well, Jimmy, it was so much fun getting to interview you today, getting to hear your story. If you've got any legal needs in Oklahoma, call Jimmy, especially if you need anything that revolves around E2 visas or anything like that. Jimmy's your guy. And it was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to get to interview you. And I know we'll be discussing more and maybe have a round 2 down the road.
Thanks so much for having me.